When everything is so important in our club and you try to do everything, I think my players are talking really loud about what they want. So I'm really sorry about to our fans. I have nothing to say anymore.
Man United are, at this moment in time, whatever the problems are an average Premier League team.
Manchester United, a club once feared across Europe and spent last season on its knees. A broken dressing room, angry fans, pundits calling it the lowest point in modern history.
I felt yesterday for the first time, just through instinct, watching it on the television, seeing players' faces, seeing players' body language, that there might be an element of players really doubting the system and what's going on.
Everything that could go wrong did. The chaos didn't stop when the season ended. Star players left. The chemistry cracked. The pressure on Rúben Amorim grew heavier with every match.
And this has been a disaster for Manchester United, but also Rúben Amorim. And the quicker Manchester United make the decision on the manager, I think it's better for everybody, because as I said, it's been a disaster for club, but also the manager.
For months, the headlines spoke only of crisis. But suddenly, something has changed. 3 wins, 3 matches, 3 moments that changed everything. The world is witnessing a new Manchester United, not just in results, but in the way they fight, press, and believe again. It feels different. It looks different. So what really happened inside Old Trafford? What turned disaster into momentum? This is the scary truth about Rúben Amorim's Manchester United nobody is noticing. Manchester United brought in Rúben Amorim, a bright Portuguese coach known for his success with Sporting Lisbon, hoping that new ideas could cure deep wounds. But the inheritance he received was toxic, an unbalanced squad, a fractured culture, and a fan base divided between hope and fury. By the time Amorim's first few months passed, the scale of the damage became clear. United lost matches not because they were simply outplayed, but because they lacked belief. The players looked like strangers sharing the same shirt. Statistics told the story brutally. 9 home defeats in the league, their joint worst in Premier League history, only 42 points across the campaign, their lowest return in 50 years, and a miserable 15th place finish, their worst since 1973-74. Even the Europa League, once a lifeline for silverware, turned into heartbreak. They reached the final only to lose 1-0 to Tottenham Hotspur, a match defined by nerves and indecision. Amorim's words after a 3-1 defeat to Brighton in January cut through the noise. "We are probably the worst United side in the club's history," he said. Not as an insult, but as a statement of reality. It was a confession of how far the team had fallen, disjointed on the pitch, dispirited off it, and adrift of identity. The fans echoed his sentiment with protests that filled the streets outside Old Trafford, even chants of disillusionment towards the board and the players. The club, once a global symbol of pride and power, looked more like a house divided. It wasn't just results that hurt, it was the manner of them. United weren't simply losing, they were unraveling. Defensive errors piled up, midfield control vanished, and attacking play collapsed into aimless possession. The once fearsome Old Trafford atmosphere faded into silence and boos. Analysts pointed to a broken system, pressing without coordination, fullbacks left isolated, and a midfield too easily bypassed. The chaos extended into the numbers, one of the lowest XG outputs in the league and among the highest shots conceded per game. Inside the club, the financial situation compounded the misery. Ratcliffe's Ineos group began tightening budgets, announcing redundancies, and demanding accountability for years of overspending. The pressure trickled down through every department. For the players, it meant uncertainty. For Amorim, it meant inheriting not just a team to coach, but an institution in need of cleansing. By the season's final day, a 2-0 win over Aston Villa offered only cosmetic relief. The campaign was already written in history as one of failure. Amorim faced cameras with calm resignation, admitting that the road back to respectability would be long. Pundits on television questioned if even he could survive it. Gary Neville called the season an embarrassment of planning, while Roy Keane described the squad as uncoachable. Across social media, fans voiced the same sentiment. United were no longer feared, only pitied. Yet beneath the ruins, something subtle was shifting. Amid the chaos, Amorim began to study. He analyzed data, reviewed fitness patterns, and noted which players still cared, which ones ran when they didn't have to. He started reshaping the culture quietly, away from headlines. The team might have been broken, but he was already mapping its rebuild. The collapse of 2024 to 2025 would not just become a stain, it would become a lesson. And in that lesson lay the first hint of what was coming next. Because from disaster disaster, Amorim understood one truth. Before you can rebuild Manchester United, you must first break the illusion of what it used to be. The summer of 2025 was unlike any Manchester United had ever seen. The season had ended in humiliation, and now the rebuilding was about to begin, not on paper, but in blood, sweat, and exits. The club was fractured, both structurally and emotionally. Fans were still protesting outside Old Trafford, demanding accountability, while inside Carrington, the atmosphere felt eerily uncertain. For Rúben Amorim, this was not simply a transfer window, it was an exorcism. United's first step was separation. Veteran names who had symbolized the past were quietly moved on. Christian Eriksen, Victor Lindelof, and Johnny Evans were released as part of a cost-cutting and culture-cleansing effort led by Ineos. The message was clear, sentiment was no longer currency. Even the academy core, long considered untouchable, was not spared. Marcus Rashford, once the face of the club, was loaned to Barcelona. Alejandro Garnacho was sold to Chelsea for around £40 million. Then players like Antony went to Real Betis. Jadon Sancho followed soon after. Overnight, the dressing room hierarchy was gone, stripped bare of old familiarity and inflated egos. Amorim didn't just want fresh legs, he wanted fresh minds. The restructuring extended beyond the squad. Sir Jim Ratcliffe's Ineos group, now in operational control, initiated sweeping changes behind the scenes. Jean-Claude Barada took over as chief executive. A leaner recruitment model was implemented, replacing short-term panic buys with targeted profiles that fit Amorim's system. The era of impulse signings was officially over. Amorim, who had already built a reputation for precision at Sporting Lisbon, demanded data-driven recruitment aligned to his tactical ideology, vertical, intense, and disciplined. For the media, it was open season. Every headline questioned the plan. Could a manager from Portugal handle the weight of Manchester United's expectations? Could this roster of unknowns replace the club's stars? Gary Neville warned that too much change too soon could implode the project. Fans, already skeptical after years of false dawns, braced for another letdown, but Amorim stayed silent. While others debated, he worked, noting the consistent failings, midfield gaps, poor pressing synchronization, over-reliance on individual brilliance. He was determined to erase those habits one by one. "We don't need heroes," he told his staff. "We need a team." The summer signings reflected that philosophy. Matheus Cunha joined from Wolves, bringing flexibility across the front line. Brian Mbeumo from Brentford added pace and pressing intelligence on the right. Benjamin Šeško arrived from RB Leipzig, a tall, tireless striker with movement designed for Amorim's vertical game. In goal, Senna Lammens came in quietly, but his debut months later would prove symbolic of Amorim's faith and mentality over reputation. Still, the outside noise was deafening. The media labeled United's start flat, with pundits calling the rebuild a gamble. Fans inside Old Trafford were restless. The ghost of last season still fresh in every misplaced pass. Every draw felt like defeat. Every loss a crisis. The scars of the past hadn't healed. They were simply covered by a new layer of hope too fragile to protect them. And yet, even in the tension, there were flickers of something different. Amorim's United pressed higher, moved quicker, and showed moments of structure previously unseen. The new arrivals, though still adapting, played with collective urgency. Bruno Fernandes and Casemiro began to look like leaders again. Behind them, Delight, Maguire, and Shaw, all finally fit, started shouting instructions like commanders returning to battle. There was no magic switch, but something was forming. Unity. Inside the club, staff members noticed subtle changes. Training sessions were more demanding, yet more focused. Players stayed longer after practice, studying footage together. Amorim encouraged accountability meetings, private, blunt, and honest. Mistakes were analyzed without blame, only solutions. Slowly, trust began to return. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't fast, but amid the noise of critics and the absence of stars, Manchester United were starting to remember how to be a team. They were still far from stability, still haunted by inconsistency, still one defeat away from another storm. But this time, they had a plan. The goal was to rebuild the team's footballing DNA, one training session at a time. For the first time in years, United had a manager who valued system over superstardom. Amorim's blueprint was simple, but demanding. He introduced a hybrid 3-4-3 shape, an evolution of what had made his Sporting Lisbon side feared across Europe. The plan was rooted in verticality, pressing triggers, and speed. The fullbacks pushed high to stretch the pitch. The midfielders rotated to create overloads, and the front three operated as coordinated coordinated hunters rather than isolated attackers. It was a system that required total commitment and synchrony. Mistiming one press or losing one duel could unravel the entire shape, but when executed correctly, it turned defense into a weapon. The early weeks were messy. Players accustomed to reactive football struggled with Amorim's insistence on proactive control. In training, he paused drills repeatedly to correct positioning, often walking onto the pitch himself to demonstrate body angles and pressing cues. The sessions were intense, lasting longer than usual, built around repetition and muscle memory. He drilled into them the importance of small margins, how one player's hesitation could destroy a line, and how collective aggression could win matches before halftime. Benjamin Šeško, the tall Slovenian forward, brought a dimension United had lacked for years. Relentless pressing from the front. He wasn't the kind of striker who waited for chances. He created them through movement and chaos. His runs opened spaces for Mason Mount to attack, while Brian Mbeumo's pace on the right stretched defenses wider. Matheus Cunha floated between the lines, linking attacks with intelligent touches and unselfish runs. Amorim's front line wasn't designed for flair, it was designed to suffocate. Behind them, the midfield balance began to reappear. Casemiro, rejuvenated after a difficult season, rediscovered his authority as the pivot, while Ahmad took on a dual role, pressing high, yet dropping deep to orchestrate transitions, also helping out defensively. The difference was visible even to casual observers. United weren't playing faster just for the sake of it. They were playing with intention. Their transitions carried direction, their build-up had layers, and their defensive recovery looked coordinated rather than desperate. But the most significant shift came at the back. Amorim rebuilt the defensive structure around Matthijs de Ligt, Harry Maguire, and Luke Shaw. Also there's Heaven, easing back from injury, and Yoro, quietly reliable when called upon. Two players who could walk into most teams in Europe, yet here they're part of the rotation. That's how good this United defense runs. Supported by the quiet emergence of new goalkeeper Senna Lamens. On October 4th, during his first Premier League start, Lamens' calmness in possession and command of the box turned heads. His passing range allowed United to build from deep, something they had struggled with since Prem de Gea. Suddenly, the defense wasn't just surviving pressure, it was initiating attacks. Amorim's instructions were clear. Possession begins with the goalkeeper, not the midfield. Every pass, every rotation, every clearance had to carry purpose. In the background, Amorim's philosophy was spreading. Staff analysts began tracking data differently. Pressing distances, second ball recoveries, sprint synchrony. For the first time, United's training metrics showed progress. The number of successful high presses doubled compared to the previous season. The average distance between defense and attack lines narrowed from 42 meters to 34, a small detail that made a world of difference in compactness. The results weren't immediate, but the indicators were undeniable. And yet, even as structure improved, results didn't follow right away. The press doubted Amorim's plan. Critics accused him of overcomplicating a simple game, while pundits insisted United lacked the personnel to play high-tempo football. But Amorim didn't flinch. "We're not building for today," he told reporters in late September. "We're building for the future." Inside the dressing room, players began to believe him. Bruno's work rate inspired others. His leadership grew louder. Casemiro, Maguire, and de Ligt became lieutenants of Amorim's message, demanding intensity from everyone around them. And for the first time in a long time, Manchester United looked like a team moving with one heartbeat, one plan, and one purpose. The football wasn't perfect, but it was alive. The rhythm was back. The patterns were forming. The tactical foundations that Amorim had envisioned months earlier were finally beginning to breathe on the pitch. The press was coordinated, the defense compact, and the attack unpredictable. All they needed now was proof, a stretch of games where the process would finally meet product. The critics still called United a work in progress, but within Carrington, there was a growing sense that something had shifted. The storm had not passed, but the winds had changed direction. And then came October, a month that would redefine everything. It came quietly, without grand predictions or bold headlines. October began like any other month. Nervous fans, skeptical pundits, and a team still learning how to trust itself. But football has a way of changing stories in the space of a week, and for Manchester United, that change started to feel inevitable. After months of frustration, everything suddenly began to click. The press was still circling Rúben Amorim, waiting for another slip. United had lost 3 of their first 6 Premier League matches of the new season. The mood around Old Trafford was heavy, tense, uncertain, yet inside the dressing room, something had shifted. Amorim had simplified the instructions, focusing on rhythm rather than perfection. He told his players to stop chasing results and start chasing performances. The message resonated. Training sessions that once looked forced now flowed with energy. There was laughter again at Carrington, the kind that comes only when belief starts to return. The breakthrough came not from magic, but from method. Amorim's system, rehearsed for months, finally synchronized on the pitch. The front 3 began pressing in unison, the midfield shielded transitions, and the backline held firm under pressure. The players stopped looking lost and started playing like a unit. The effect was immediate. Over the course of 3 consecutive matches, Manchester United transformed from a team haunted by its past into one beginning to rediscover its soul. The results? 3 straight wins, multiple goals in each, sent a jolt of electricity through the club. But it wasn't just the score lines that stood out, it was the manner of the performances. United played with intensity, with confidence, with identity. Every press was coordinated, every attack carried intent. The players looked sharper, quicker, and hungrier. The new signings who had seemed tentative in August were now leading from the front. Benjamin Šeško began finding rhythm, using his height and movement to stretch defenses. Bryan Mbeumo brought relentless energy on the right, pressing and tracking with the conviction of a player who understood his role completely. Matheus Cunha, whose early form was questioned, began connecting attacks with intelligence, creating chances through positioning rather than chaos. In midfield, Bruno Fernandes and Casemiro found balance at last. Mount's tireless running and link-up play controlled the game, turning transition into a weapon. Amorim's tactical drills, hours of spacing, coordination, and pressing shape were finally visible under the floodlights. The players no longer chased the ball in panic. They moved as one organism, hunting in packs, suffocating opponents high up the pitch. Defensively, structure replaced desperation. Amorim's insistence on compactness had tightened the spaces that once doomed United. Matthijs de Ligt, Maguire, and Luke Shaw operated like extensions of one another, shifting, covering, and communicating constantly, while Ahmad and Diogo Dalot's overlapping runs provided both width and cover. Each clean sheet felt like a statement. Manchester United were learning to defend as a team again. The presence of Lamens behind them gave calm where panic once lived. His command of aerials, combined with his ability to launch quick distributions, turned defense into attack in seconds. Data analysts inside Carrington noted a 30% drop in shots conceded per match compared to last season, and the team's pass completion out from the back climbed above 85%. For a club once mocked for tactical chaos, these were quiet revolutions. The mood among the fans began to shift. The songs inside Old Trafford sounded different. Not the defiant chants of frustration, but the joyful rhythm of belief returning. The media, slow to acknowledge the change, began to take notice. Headlines that once read, "Amorim under pressure," started to say, "United show signs of life." Analysts called it the most organized United side in years. But Amorim was not celebrating. He knew momentum could be as fragile as confidence. In post-match interviews, he spoke with calm restraint, reminding reporters that consistency, not emotion, would define their revival. It was a message meant as much for his players as for the fans. Inside the club, that road felt longer than ever, but it was no longer dark. Players who had once doubted themselves were smiling again. The staff who had worked in silence through criticism began to feel vindicated. Amorim's fingerprints were everywhere, in the patterns, in the discipline, in the quiet belief that this was no longer the Manchester United of the past year. The October run did more than earn points. It reintroduced Manchester United to itself. From disaster came direction, from doubt came momentum, and from momentum came a new question. Was this the beginning of a renaissance, or merely a flash of hope before another storm? For now, no one could answer that, but the feeling at Old Trafford had changed. The chaos was fading, replaced by something long missing: control. And as United climbed back up the table, Rúben Amorim had turned survival into possibility. The club that had lost its soul was learning to breathe again. Momentum is fragile. One wrong turn, one injury, one slip in focus, and everything can come undone. That's the reality Rúben Amorim knows better than anyone. The storm that once buried Manchester United has eased, but the clouds still hang low. Even as the team rides its best form in over 2 years, Amorim refuses to speak in absolutes. We're improving, he told reporters after their 3rd straight win, but we're not fixed. Progress is a habit, not a headline in football. That's the real foundation of transformation, not tactics, not transfers, belief. The lights at Old Trafford no longer flicker over disillusioned faces. They shine on a team learning to believe in itself again, step by step, game by game, from disaster to momentum, from humiliation to hope. This is not the end of Manchester United's story. It's the beginning of a new one.